Mission defense got the ire of Quin Snyder. We rewatched and saw what got him upset. Plus, the pick and roll game of Joe Ingles is non-existent and it's hurting the offense. And as we play, who do we want? What about a former Jazz man? It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Thank you very much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Check out Prize Picks and use the promo code NBA. Go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks, your daily fantasy made easy. All right. The Utah Jazz got beat last night. They've lost 9 of 11, and there are reasons why this team is struggling without Mike Conley or Donovan Mitchell in games like they didn't used to. We will delve into that. But first, a positive is that the Jazz half-court defense got much better last night. And really, to me, they're calling it a mild strain of Rudy Gobert's calf. So let's assume he's missing about a week. This sequence to me here that I think is important for the next period of time is whether or not the Jazz can get better in half-court defense, learning how to play without Rudy Gobert. That, to me, is the only really important thing to me in the next stretch of games. Winning and losing, I think, is unlikely to win without Rudy, but can we get better so that you're better for the playoffs? And last night, the Phoenix Suns half-court offense was an 88.6 in the 35th percentile. If you dig into that, that's actually one of Phoenix's least good half-court offensive games of the year. So the Jazz really did a very, very good job last night in half-court defense. We saw an urgency on the ball. We saw a really strong execution of the game plan, particularly in the second quarter. Last night, the game plan was to force Chris Paul and Devin Booker to their left, make them really work to be able to get back in this, to the spots that they want to get to. And I think you saw last night the Jazz really doing a very good job of that. In fact, so Phoenix last night, Phoenix has had about 10 games where they've been worse in the half court. And generally, those are actually the very few games they've lost this year. And a little, frankly, if you're Phoenix, a little disturbing on who they're against. Clippers, Warriors, Denver, Boston, Dallas, Minnesota, Sacramento, Cleveland, Clippers, Miami, Houston, and the Jazz last night. The flip side is that the Jazz transition defense last night was horrendous. Really, truly, truly horrendous. In fact, Phoenix had one of their 7th best game of the year in transition, where the Jazz allowed 1.7 points per transition opportunity. If we look at some of the quarter by quarter stats, it's a little hard to tell because transition's a weird number. Clean the glass doesn't break it down by quarter the way I would ideally love them to be able to look at it. But we always like to look at kind of the advanced stats. The second quarter was really brilliant. The Jazz held Phoenix to 5 of 17, and there might be some level here where Phoenix is up 21 at the end of one after torching the Jazz, and they let off the gas a little bit in that quarter, and the Jazz take advantage of them and knock them out of it. And then once the fourth quarter comes back, Phoenix decides to put the stamp down in the fourth quarter again. And so there is an argument that, that these are false numbers. I'm not like, let's not, I don't want to be a Pollyanna about this. I'm literally think that, that's what this stretch is about. And those numbers were good. But in the first quarter, the Jazz defensive rating was a 156. That's awful. Just truly awful. And I don't care if Rudy's playing or not. That's awful. In the second quarter, the Jazz defensive rating was a 47.8. That's world class. And I don't actually care whether or not the Suns may have let off the gas because of the fact that they were up 21. That's world class. It really was a brilliant defensive performance in that stretch. Hassan Whiteside, by the way, who's getting a lot of criticism, and I get it. He visually is hard to watch at times. His effort level is not great, and his reaction time is slow. It's hard. He's on the floor for 10 minutes, 10 and a half minutes of that quarter with a defensive rating of 47. So let's not forget that in the discussion of Hassan Whiteside yesterday. In the third quarter, the game's close now. Like the Jazz got that back to a pretty close game, and they end up taking the lead. And in the third quarter, the Jazz defensive rating is a 109.1. So it's still pretty good. And with Hassan Whiteside on the floor for 6 minutes and 28, it's an 81.3. With Mike Conley on the floor, it's a 64. Like Mike really battled last night. I mean, Quin said he spilled his guts out on the floor last night. In the fourth quarter, it does turn the other way. Suddenly, Phoenix's offensive rating goes up to back to a 135. We actually scored a really good rate in there also, and we don't have enough. But I do think, you saw some signs. Frankly, we were so bad defensively against Detroit and some of these other games without Rudy. Anything can be better. But if you actually some of that makes sense. Like if you run through what happened last time Rudy was on, Rudy misses the Denver game, last minute, illness, unexpected. Team goes to Toronto. Most of the guys don't go. They play a back end of a back-to-back against Indiana, but they can't really prepare. They go to Detroit, and they didn't practice. They have COVID running through the team. They're trying to avoid having it spread. They don't practice. They're playing Detroit. I'll bet they thought they could win, and then they're not ready for that without Rudy either. Then you come home and play Cleveland without Rudy against 3 7-footers. And again, I don't really think you had practice time. You played Detroit on the 10th. You flew on that night. You don't practice the 11th. You shoot around. And then by the 16th, you actually have practice time. You have 3 days off. And then I believe Rudy came back for that game and we beat Denver. Rudy goes 18 and 19, if I remember, in that game. So you really didn't have time. This time, Rudy gets hurt in the Golden State game. We sit out Phoenix. You're back. You have a little bit of shoot around time yesterday. We'll see. I don't think they'll practice today as they fly to Memphis. So, again, not a lot of time, but you're heading to Memphis and Minnesota, at least with the knowledge that you're not going to have Rudy for these games. And hopefully that means we can at least get better at this and improve in this regard. So, we'll see what happens. But that to me was at least the positive last night. Now, I reviewed the transition early in the game that got Quin Snyder's ire. It's bad. It's as bad as my hair is this morning, just puffing out everywhere for you. I kind of look like I put my finger in an electric shock. It was actually, I watched the first quarter of our transition defense. The first one, Cam Johnson hits a three. Bismack Biyombo outruns Whiteside. Bogey has to drop back to help on that. And then he has to close out without a lot of juice. There's just not a lot of juice, frankly. Like Joe and Boyan didn't start the game with a lot of juice, and Whiteside didn't either. That group just didn't have, it wasn't like outlandish effort. You're watching Phoenix rotate around and in you defensively, and their first or second defensive possession of the game is just perfection. Mike Conley ends up taking an awful fadeaway in the middle of the lane because they can't get anything else. The Jazz just didn't have that. They don't have that skill, frankly, defensively, but they also didn't have that tenacity early. Bridges gets a layup early on a back cut. It's incredible. The Jazz kind of ran 3/4 court in transition on that play. He back cuts behind Whiteside. I'm not sure. I don't know enough to entirely tell you whose fault everything is, but Joe's on the other side, like as though he's waiting to guard Chris Paul. Hassan doesn't go all the way back defensively. I'm not like, it wasn't clear who was guarding whom on what and what. And Boyan, frankly, is even with Bridges when they leave that side of the floor and then leaves him to kind of get to somebody else. And it's just bad. Then Conley goes one-on-one on Biyombo up at the top, shoots a three, misses. Biyombo then releases, which is really smart. Conley's the only one back. Whiteside doesn't run back fast enough to help. Conley gets pinned at the rim on Biyombo. These aren't easy. Like these aren't like, if Biyombo's guarding on the play and he has enough faith in his guys that they're going to be able to get the rebound, and we weren't crashing offensive glass at all at that point, which, I guess we're worried about. We have never equated those two together. We don't usually, but we had 2 offensive rebounds on 13 misses in that first quarter, one by Whiteside, one by Clarkson later. We weren't crashing with that kind of energy early. So they knew that Biyombo knew he could release, and they'd get the rebound. They're long and big as well. Then Ingles drives, gets his shot blocked by Biyombo. Booker ends up getting a hammer slam dunk, and Bojan Bridges in the corner. Bojan like stays there and lets Booker take the 45 straight to the basket. He's got to cut over. And the other end, Joe is not getting back fast enough. So if Bojan had cut that off, I think he goes to Bridges for a wide open three because Joe hadn't gotten back in time after getting a shot blocked. A long run, like hard, not easy. None of this is easy. And then there's another, Bridges gets another layup, and I'd watched enough, and my hair looked like this, and it was time. I mean, it was brutal. And that transition defense is brutal. And that, sure, Rudy's big and we're small, and so you need a bunch of those, these guys to. It's hard for this group. But our transition defense last night. So as much as I'm going to be really positive about the half court offense or the half court defense, the transition defense was brutal, and it's just it's hard. It's not. None of these are easy. Phoenix is super good at it, but they were just bad plays. And I think I just documented them fairly well, to be perfectly honest with you. So we'll see whether we can get better at that. But I thought the positive is we got better there. The one thing that was interesting, and it's not surprising, is how much we're really, really struggling right now to score the basketball without our main guys, which again isn't stunning in any way, shape, or form. But I want to dig into a little bit. A lot of it has to do with what we used to be able to do is maintain our pick and roll game without Mike or Donovan, and we actually can't do that right now. I want to tell you about a neat company. It's a local Utah company. It's called Summit Capital. They're a local investment group made up of successful business operators. They actually invested in Locked On. We actually sold a year ago today, by the way, to Tegna. Anyway, Summit, that was irrelevant. Other than that, Summit Capital was a part of Locked On, invested in Locked On, and were great partners for us. So this is why I feel comfortable telling you about them. They provide capital management for those seeking to buy out the owner of a business they work in. So I think this is super interesting. If you know someone who works in a company, the owners are getting older, they don't really have a buyout plan. Maybe they don't really want to take the company, they don't want to put the effort and take the company to the next level. The manager, the general manager, who's been working there for a while, knows how to take it to the next step, but doesn't have the financial resources to either buy the company or have the financial resources to take it to the next step. Summit Capital will come in, do an equity deal with that manager, give them the funds to be able to take the company and then help them drive that company to a new level. The owner sells out. They feel pretty good about it. And the new manager gets this opportunity of a lifetime to change their life and everyone else around them. Pretty awesome. So Summit Capital, that's a great one. They also are looking for entrepreneurs seeking capital to grow businesses or owners seeking to sell their business. They are entrepreneurs themselves. I know Matt well. I know David well. Know the crew. I've gotten to know them well over the years. Actually know David's family, super, super awesome family. They approach investing with the mind of the entrepreneur, unlike private equity or venture capital funds. They do not have an artificial timeline, and I can attest to that. They never once asked us when we were closing. Now, we did it pretty fast. We were inside a year of our funding, but they never once. So anyway, if you want to reach Matt, 801-796-2033. That's 801-796-2033. Text Matt, 801-796-2033. You can email lockedonjazz@summitcaputah.com. That's lockedonjazz@summitcaputah.com. Or you can just go to summitcaputah.com to click on for more information. Today's show is also brought to you by betonline.ag. That's our home for all your betting needs over at betonline.ag. A 50% welcome bonus with the promo code Locked On. NFL this weekend, Chiefs are a 7-point favorite. Rams are a 3.5-point favorite over the Niners. Over on the basketball front, 2 games tonight. Lakers will match up against the 76ers, and the 76ers are 2.5-point favorite. Warriors are a 6-point favorite over the Timberwolves, who are flat out good. Championship odds, Brooklyn at plus 300, Warriors at plus 375, Phoenix at plus 700. I watched Phoenix 2 nights in a row. I've watched the Warriors. I've watched a lot of these teams. Surprising to me that we're at plus 700 on that. Bucks at plus 750. We're now down to plus 1,100. Miami, who has the number 1 seed in the East, is at plus 1,200 right now. NBA player futures, the MVP award. I just check this all the time because I still can't believe it. Embiid is now the favorite at plus 200. Curry at plus 275. Giannis at plus 300. And Jokic at plus 350. We just don't want to give it to Jokic 2 years in a row, I guess, is the deal. That's all at betonline.ag. Promo code Locked On for a 50% welcome bonus. All right, let's get some of the Let me get some of your comments and questions. We'll also be playing Do They Have Anyone We Want Tonight today, and we'll look at, we'll see a former jazz man there. Special hello to the crew and a hello to Mr. Lundstrom in Sweden right now, who's entering a sauna with a beer and listening to Locked On Jazz. Wow, that's something else. Clint says, "Can we talk about trading Clarkson and Joe?" Sure, we can talk about anything you want. What are we getting for him? Why would we do that? Um, you know, sure, we can talk about anything you want. The hair is epic today. Thank you very much. It just tells you I don't really care. I didn't see this. Adam, thoughts on Quinn and Rudy Gay bench heated exchange? Rudy Gay was not very good last night, so maybe it was a spark. And really, what's happening right now, and it's accentuated by not having Donovan and Rudy, but as guys are just not quite on their level of what we're used to seeing, it's putting a pressure on each guy next to them or below them on the tier. So I don't know how you want to look at it, but if you look at our bench unit as Jordan, Joe, Rudy, Hassan, as one of those guys doesn't play as well as they're supposed to, the idea is that then somebody else can pick them up. But right now, with Joe being, I hate the 10 percentage points off last year, 3-point shooting, because last year was an anomaly, but even 5 percentage points off his career average, like that suddenly puts a burden on Jordan. Well, Jordan's actually at this point, as we've talked about, 100 games in, a 40% shooter, 32% high volume, which is fine as long as Joe's super efficient. George Niang was super efficient. As long as Rudy Gay's doing his part, then that's kind of fine that we need someone to take those possessions. Remember, before Jordan came, we could not score off that bench. Like when we traded for Jordan on December 23rd, we could not score. The bench numbers, it was like this catastrophic disaster every single time that went to the bench. And then we got Jordan, and that sparked it and opened it up for everyone. So, we're I think we've forgotten that a little bit, but part of what opens it up is so Jordan takes a bunch of shots and uses a bunch of possessions, but he gets so much attention that he flips it out to Joe or other guys for opportunities occasionally. And they hit, and then that lack of efficiency by Jordan gets outweighed by the other guy's efficiency. But if they're not efficient, then suddenly Jordan's lack of efficiency is a problem. If Joe's not hitting and not comfortable shooting, then Royce's lack of shooting is a problem. If Rudy Gay's not, it all is intertwined right now, and it's all pulling in different ways. The other one I would say last night, I might be overstating this a little bit because I love Mikal Bridges. Like I like defensive players. I wouldn't be too worried about last night's loss in the sense that I'm not entirely sure if you were drafting, you wouldn't draft 3 Suns before a Jazz player was on the floor last night, right? You certainly would take Booker and Chris Paul first, 2 players drafted in last night's game. And then I don't know, if I already have Booker and Chris Paul, I'm certainly taking Mikal Bridges as my next player, not Mike Conley. But and Mike gave everything last night, so I don't want to be that trying to be critical of Mike in any way, shape, or form. But I mean, I just think Bridges is super. And just his defense is amazing. His running the floor is amazing. He's just a great player, and he does so many things well that I'm not entirely sure, as I said, that if you're drafting last night, that you might not take Bridges. And at age, you certainly would. But so even if you don't, you take Bridges probably with a 3rd pick. Bojan, I'm concerned, by the way. He was 3 of 13 last night. He dribbled early with his left hand, got called for the palm, then dribbled very little with his left hand the rest of the game, had problems with that splint. That was not an encouraging night to me on Bojan Bogdanovic's ability to play for 4 to 6 weeks with this splint when he's ripping it off, throwing it away. And I thought looked uncomfortable even on some of the moves. The basket, there's a moment where he brings, my memories, he brings his left hand in. He didn't do it last night on a few plays. They're saying he injured it against Houston, so that's 3 games. He's shooting 38% from the field and 31% from 3 in the 3 games since he got injured. And, if you back it up, including the Houston game, he's at 39% and 28% from 3. And he wasn't actually on fire before that either. If you want to get into it, he's over the last 8 games shooting 23% from 3. So, I'm a little concerned on that front. Wit. Can we talk about Chuck D giving another amazing compliment? That must be so. It's amazing. It's amazing. Come on. Chuck D, Public Enemy, society changing band, rocked the, foundation of power structure. Brilliant artist, epic American culture piece, like somehow liking my play-by-play, giving me the nickname Play Casso. Like, come on, silly, it's awesome, mind blowing, love it. Not gonna lie, like even with this crazy hair, love it. Does that make everybody happier?